Hello friends, today's topic is valuation of motor car. In the valuation of motor car, we will determine the value of motor car, the benefit which is provided by the employer to the employee. It could be either in the form of motor car provided by the employer, which is used by the employee for the personal benefit. If it is used for official duty, then nothing is taxable. However, if it is partly used for official duties and partly for personal, and the running and maintenance charges are borne by the employer, then there is a perquisite value which is to be determined as per subrule 2 of rule 3. So guys, on the screen, motor car is prescribed as per subrule 2 of rule 3. If the motor car is provided by the employer to the employee, it will be perquisite in the hands of the specified employees only. So where the motor car is straightforwardly provided by the employer, then the perquisite value is taxable in the hands of specified employees only. Specified employees, as we have studied earlier, are the director employees or employees having a substantial beneficial interest in the company, or the person who are deriving salary of exceeding 50,000. So where the motor car is provided by the employer, it will be taxable as perquisite in the hands of specified employees only. However, the word use is important over here. The use of any vehicle by the employee from his residence to his office, other place of work, or vice versa. So from the place of residence to the place of work, or from the place of work to the place of residence, that is vice versa, shall not be regarded as perquisite or as a benefit, which is mentioned as per explanation below section 17.2.3. But if the motor car is owned by the employee and used by him or members of his family wholly for personal use, and for which the employer reimburses the running and maintenance expenses of the car, it will be perquisite in the hands of the employees. So, two conditions over here. First is, motor car is owned by the employee and it is used for personal purposes, but the running and maintenance expenses are borne by the employer. So there is a benefit over here, and accordingly it will be taxable. So here what we are discussing is, we are trying to distinguish between the motor car which is provided, or the motor car which is used for personal purposes, or the motor car which is used for official purposes. Then it will not be perquisite. However, if the motor car is used for personal purposes and the running and maintenance expenses are also reimbursed by the employer, then there is a perquisite value, and accordingly it will be taxed in the hands of the employee. The value of perquisite by way of use of motor car to an employee by an employer shall be determined in the following manner. So in subsequent slides, there are several categories through which the perquisite value is determined of the motor car as per subrule 2 of rule 3. So again, the value of perquisite by way of use of the motor car is to be determined as per subrule 2 of rule 3. First is, where the motor car is owned or hired by the employer. So the employee is using the motor car which is owned by the employer, and it is used for official purposes only, is used wholly and exclusively in the performance of his official duties. In those cases where the engine does not exceed 1.6 liters and engine exceeds 1.6 liters, there are two subcategories. So for both the categories, it won't be a perquisite, provided the documents specified are maintained by the employer. So the documentation needs to be perfect. where the employer is claiming that the use of the vehicle, the use of the motor car by the employee is specifically for official duties. We will be covering in the later slides what is the meaning of documentation and what sort of documentation needs to be maintained by the employer for claiming an exemption wherein the employer is claiming the motor car is used by the employee only for official duties. So wherein here the first category is the motor car is owned by the employer and it is used for official purpose. If yes, there is no perquisite value provided a detailed documentation is maintained by the employer. Next category is used exclusively for personal purposes. The motor car here is owned by the employer and the employee uses it only for personal purposes of the employee or any member of his household is using the same, and running and maintenance expenses are met or reimbursed by the employer. In those cases, whether it is cc of the engine is less than 1.6 liters or more than 1.6 liters, the actual amount of expenditure incurred by the employer on the running and maintenance will be termed as perquisite, including remuneration paid by the employer to the chauffeur, to the driver, as increased by the amount representing normal wear and tear. Normal wear and tear wherein the depreciation value of the motor car will be added and as reduced by any amount charged from the employee. So there are three components over here: running and maintenance of the vehicle which is paid by the employer, then driver fees which are paid by the employer, and normal wear and tear of the motor car needs to be added to the perquisite value. All these are sum up and there is a reduction which is allowed where any amount is recovered from the employee. Similarly, this category is same as there is no difference between the cc engine of 1.6 liter and where the cc engine is exceeding 1.6 liter in this particular case. So here the case is the motor car is owned by the employer and the employee is using the motor car for personal purposes, and running and maintenance charges are borne by the employer in these cases. So if this condition is satisfied, then three components: running and maintenance, driver fees, and normal wear and tear of the asset of the car will be added for computing the perquisite value. Category C, wherein the motor car is owned by the employer and the employee is using it partly for performance of his duty, partly for official purpose, and partly for private purpose. Either the employee is using or any member of his household is using the same. In that category, first subcategory is expenses on maintenance and running are met by or reimbursed by the employer. So R&M is reimbursed by the employer. If yes, then 1800 per month plus 900 chauffeur fees will be added. So 1800 per month where cc of the engine is less than 1.6 liters, where cc of the engine is more than 1.6 liters, 2400 per month is the value plus 900 over here chauffeur fees, driver fees will be added to the perquisite value. Second category, if expenses on running and maintenance are fully met by the employee. So here the perquisite value will decrease, which will be 600 and 900. Also plus 900 chauffeur fees will be added. So in total 600 plus 900, which is 1500, and 1800 where cc of the engine is more than 1.6 liters in case where the R&M is borne by the employee. Where R&M is borne by the employer, then the total fees will be increased to 2700 and over here it will be increased to 3,300 including the chauffeur fees. So first category, it was that the employer is owning the asset, is owning the motor car. Now second category is the employee owns the motor car, but actual R&M charges including remuneration of chauffeur, if any, are made or reimbursed by the employer. So the asset is owned by the employee, but other expenses, R&M expenses, driver fees is borne by the employer. In those cases, again the purpose of using the asset is official purpose, then not a perquisite in both the categories, where partly official and partly personal. In those cases, the actual amount of expenditure incurred by the employer, actual amount of expenditure meaning R&M expenditure, chauffeur fees, actual amount of expenditure incurred by the employer will be reduced by amount specified in serial number 1C1. 1C1 is nothing but, this is category C and this is 1, which is 1800 and 2400 excluding chauffeur fees. So 1800 and 2400. So amount specified in serial number 1C1 above will be reduced from the actual amount of expenditure incurred by the employer, and that will be the perquisite value. In this case, both the categories are similar, in which serial number 1C1 is to be reduced from the actual amount of expenditure incurred. Third is where the employee owns any other automatic conveyance, but the actual R&M charges are made or reimbursed by the employer. In those cases, official purpose is not a perquisite. Partly official and partly personal cases, the actual amount of expenditure incurred by the employer is reduced by the amount of 900 straightforward. So here we have seen the third category, in which employee owns any other automotive conveyance, and the perquisite value will be determined based on whether it is for official purpose or personal purpose, partly personal or partly official. If it is exclusively for official purpose, then it is exempt, and if it is partly official and partly personal, then the perquisite value is actual amount of expenditure incurred by the employer less 900 amount is 900 per month. Now notes section, part 1, where more than one motor car is provided. Where there is more than one motor car provided, in those cases the first motor car will be used partly in the performance of the duties and partly personal purpose. It will be assumed that the first motor car is used for both the purposes, and accordingly the perquisite value will be calculated, and other motor car will be assumed to be used for personal purposes, and accordingly the perquisite value will be determined. On the screen, value of the perquisite shall be the amount calculated in respect of one car, as if the employee had been provided one motor car for use partly in the performance of his duties and partly for his private or personal purposes, and the amount calculated in respect of other car or cars, as if he had been provided with such car or car exclusively for his personal purposes, and accordingly the perquisite value will be calculated. Second point is documentation to be maintained by the employer, where the employer is claiming that the motor car is being used exclusively for official purposes. Documents to be maintained in certain cases where the employer or the employee claims that the motor car is used wholly or exclusively for performance of official duties, or that the actual expenses on the running and maintenance of the motor car owned by the employee for official duties purposes is more. Where the second category is running and maintenance, the actual running and maintenance charges, actual expenses on running and maintenance charges for official purposes is more than the amount deductible in serial number 2B or 3B, wherein the perquisite value is at a reduction value of the above table, he may claim a higher amount attributable to such official use, and the value of perquisite in such a case shall be actual amount of charges met or reimbursed by the employer as reduced by such higher amount attributable to official use of the vehicle, provided that the following conditions are satisfied. So the benefit of using for official purposes can be claimed by the employer, and where the running and maintenance charges, the actual running and maintenance charges is much higher of what is being deducted. So in the category of 2B and 3B, we have seen that amount of 1800 2400 or amount of 900 for 3B is being deducted from the actual running and maintenance charges. So where the employer is claiming that such deduction is much less from the actual expenses, so in those cases where the employer is saying that the perquisite value can be much lesser, perquisite value can be much lesser, and where the expenses are for official purposes, in those cases the employer can maintain the documents and accordingly support the claim. So following conditions are to be fulfilled: the employer has maintained complete details of journey undertaken for official purposes, which may include date of the journey, destination, mileage, and the amount of expenditure incurred thereon, as a documentation that the same is for official purposes, or my running or maintenance expenses are much higher. The employer gives a certificate, the employer has to give a certificate to that effect, that the expenditure was incurred wholly and exclusively for the performance of official duties. So if these conditions are satisfied, the employer can claim that the same is the expenditure is for official duty and accordingly nothing is taxable. Third point is meaning of normal wear and tear of a motor car for computing the perquisite value of motor car. The normal wear and tear, which is added in the category where the employer owns the asset, however the running and maintenance expenses comes under the category, the normal wear and tear comes under the category where the asset, where the motor car is owned by the employer and the use by the employee is exclusively for personal purposes, and the R&M expenses is borne by the employer. In those cases the normal wear and tear is added to the perquisite value. So for computing the normal wear and tear meaning depreciation rate of the motor car, the normal wear and tear of the motor car shall be taken at 10% per annum of the actual cost of the motor car or cars. So this concludes the valuation of motor car, which has been prescribed under sub rule 2 of rule 3. Thank you.